But I just want to make it really clear, I'm in the Hitler sucks wing of the Republican Party.
That was closeted homosexual Senator Lindsey Graham tacitly admitting that there is indeed a pro-Hitler wing of the Republican Party, which he is definitely not a part of. Now, he said that to differentiate himself from the members of his party who oppose the modern-day equivalent of Hitler, who's currently carrying out a genocide in Palestine. That's the wing that he's part of. But to be clear, the prominent conservatives opposed to Israel's genocide, they're not taking this position for altruistic reasons. Rather, they're trying to hijack the Palestinian human rights movement to foment hatred against Jewish people. And I'm talking about the actual anti-Semites like Nick Fuentes, who's being mainstreamed right now, while pro-Palestinian protesters who actually do care about human rights are being deported or deplatformed. So in essence, the ongoing civil war within the Republican Party comes down to which Hitler you support. Old Hitler or new Hitler? Decisions, because, I mean, make no mistake about it, they're all fascists at the end of the day who've already sworn fealty to at least one fascist demagogue in addition to Donald Trump. So this is really a debate about who gets an invite to their white Christian nationalist ethno-state. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the conservative leaders trying to rein in their party's explicit racism and anti-Semitism and why resistance is completely futile at this point. But the latest round of infighting kicked into overdrive after Tucker Carlson caved to pressure from his extremist audience and platformed Hitler-loving, Holocaust-denying white nationalist Nick Fuentes for an embarrassing softball interview, which led to backlash from some fellow conservatives like Ben Shapiro, who said this.
That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes. They call themselves the Groypers. They are white supremacists. They hate women, Jews, Hindus, many types of Christians, brown people of a wide variety of backgrounds, blacks, America's foreign policy, and America's Constitution. They admire Hitler and Stalin. And that splinter faction is now being facilitated and normalized within the mainstream Republican Party. The main agent in that normalization is Tucker Carlson, who is an intellectual coward, a dishonest interlocutor, and a terrible friend. If Republicans decide to cower before the likes of neo-Nazis and their propagandizers, they deserve to lose. And they will lose. Neo-Nazis and their propagandizers are not Republicans. They are not America First. They are not MAGA. They sure as hell aren't conservative. These people aren't to my right. They are not attached in any way to the fundamental principles of conservatism. And these people have already declared themselves to be my enemies. I'd be a fool not to take them seriously. If they get their way, they will hollow out the Republican Party, lead it to electoral catastrophe, and empty it and the country of any semblance of decency in the process. My answer is no. No to the Groypers. No to their publicists like Tucker Carlson. No to those who champion them. No to demoralization. No to bigotry and anti-meritocratic horse shit. No to anti-Americanism. No. This is our country. This is our party. And this is our conservative movement. And I will not stand by while it is handed over to those who betray the most fundamental principles I have spent my entire life defending and advocating. That is a path to defeat and a path to moral oblivion.
Listen, I loathe Ben Shapiro, but credit where it's due. I think it's important that he says things like this right now. And clearly lines are being drawn, as you can see, but Ben Shapiro isn't the only one condemning Carlson for what he did. At the Republican Jewish Coalition, Mark Levin made similar comments.
For 6 months, I've been fighting these bastards, whether it's Tucker Carlson or whether it's Nick Fuentes, and I've been looking over my shoulder looking for help. And you know what I found? Nothing. What do you mean we don't cancel people? We cancel stuff all the damn time. Hitler admirers, Stalin admirers, Jew haters, American haters, Churchill haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them. It's called the market system. No Hitler admirer, Holocaust denier, platformer should be anybody's friend, as a matter of fact.
So there's that. Also, other establishment Republicans like Ted Cruz made similar comments, although not everyone was in lockstep here because Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, the group responsible for Project 2025, actually issued a statement vociferously defending Tucker Carlson.
The venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail. Most importantly, The American people expect us to be focusing on our political adversaries on the left, not attacking our friends on the right. I disagree with, and even abhor, things that Nick Fuentes says. But canceling him is not the answer either.
So he came out swinging, which amplified divisions on the right after the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal penned a scathing op-ed lambasting right-wingers like Tucker Carlson and Kevin Roberts for normalizing neo-Nazis like Nick Fuentes. It also led to an internal shakeup within the Heritage Foundation, as The Hill reports. But I mean, we're only talking about one dimension of the ongoing civil war within the Republican Party, because other establishment Republicans have been trying to fight the rise of anti-Indian racism within the party, which is a problem, seeing as how there are a lot of prominent Indian Americans who are part of the MAGA movement, but even though they're conservative, it hasn't stopped them from being spared from the base's racism, and it's only gotten worse since last year's H-1B visa debate. For example, FBI Director Kash Patel was bombarded with hatred from Trump supporters after he tweeted about Diwali, with fascist podcasters like Joel Webbin telling him to get out of his country. But Patel isn't alone, because on Halloween, Vivek Ramaswamy put out a wholesome post celebrating Halloween, only to be met with the most vile racism imaginable. These screenshots are just a really small sample of the vitriol that he received, with people telling him in a variety of ways to basically get the fuck out of the country and take his kids with him. And the hate was so extreme that fellow Republican Dinesh D'Souza, who's also Indian American, came to his defense, writing on Twitter, "Look at the abuse Vivek is getting for posting an innocuous photo with his boys. This is the shit show that Heritage and Tucker have brought upon us. If this continues, I would not be surprised to see mass desertions of blacks, Latinos, and other minorities from the GOP. Unreal." Now, expectedly, that led to him facing backlash, with commenters telling him he's brown, therefore his opinion is discarded. I bet that person voted for Donald Trump, who Dinesh supports. But even though Dinesh is trying to blame this on Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, Indian American racism is not a new phenomenon within the Republican Party. Hell, racism specifically directed towards Vivek Ramaswamy himself didn't just start happening after Nick Fuentes went on Tucker Carlson, because Vivek tried very hard to convince Republican voters in the GOP primary that he wasn't a threat to them when he was running for president. And it all fell on deaf ears, because even though he was saying everything that they wanted to hear, there was still one major hurdle that he just couldn't overcome: his race, as Ann Coulter put it.
Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that.
I mean, it really doesn't get any more explicit than that. But now Vivek is running to be governor of Ohio, and he's facing more scrutiny over his race and his religion. I mean, just listen to some of the questions that conservative students asked at a recent Turning Point USA event.
Jesus Christ is God, and there is no other God. He is part of the Holy Trinity, and any other God is a demon, and it's false. How can you represent the constituents of Ohio who are 64% Christian if you are not a part of that faith? If you are an Indian, a Hindu, coming from a different culture, different religion than those who founded this country, those who grew this country, built this country, made this country the beautiful thing that it is today, what are you conserving? You are bringing change. I'll be 100% honest with you. Christianity is the one truth.
Christian voices should be the main voice of America, and I want to know basically why you seem to be, and I don't mean to be horribly offensive, but why you seem to be masquerading as a Christian.
You familiar with the Ten Commandments?
You call yourself a Hindu, but you also call yourself Christian.
I don't call myself Christian. I call myself a Hindu. I'm not running to be pastor of Ohio. I'm running to be governor of Ohio, and I didn't run to be pastor of America. I ran to be president of the United States of America. Do you think it's inappropriate for someone who's a Hindu to be, say, a U.S. president?
No, I think it's... No, well... But isn't Charlie Kirk's organization founded on Christian values as well? And isn't the United States of America also, based on what Protestantism is, it's based on how those values are? Wouldn't that contradict what your beliefs are?
Goddamn. So, needless to say, the Republican Party has a problem with identity politics. And by identity politics, I of course mean white identity politics, i.e. racism. And even though I'm thankful that prominent conservatives are calling it out, I can assure them all that they're not going to be able to control the monsters that they've created. And I want to emphasize the fact that they did indeed create these monsters. They normalized all kinds of racism and bigotry and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny. And Nick Fuentes is simply the logical conclusion to their odious ideology. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, Dinesh D'Souza tweeted a comic of a plane with Mamdani's name on it flying into a building, saying the difference is this time New York might be asking for it, with the insinuation being obviously that all Muslims are responsible for 9/11. Not to mention, Vivek Ramaswamy has repeatedly called trans people mentally ill and argued that their identity shouldn't be affirmed. And while this in no way justifies or excuses racism towards him and his family, he's experiencing a level of dehumanization comparable to the dehumanization that he promoted against other minorities, namely trans people. And while it's courageous for the likes of Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin to condemn Tucker Carlson for mainstreaming an out and proud white nationalist, they share almost as much culpability as Tucker Carlson, because Ben Shapiro, for example, has spewed the same bigoted rhetoric that he denounced in that video. He famously tweeted that Israelis like to build and Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. Hashtag settlements rock. He's also conspicuously selective about the anti-Semitism that he does choose to condemn. For example, he hired Candace Owens after she seemingly defended Hitler and only really started to take issue with her once she started to criticize Israel. He also excused Elon Musk's Hitler salute because Musk took a trip to Israel for damage control after agreeing with a neo-Nazi on Twitter that was promoting the Great Replacement conspiracy theory and specifically named Jewish people in that particular tweet. So this is why Ben Shapiro's condemnation rings hollow. Not to mention, he mainstreamed Matt Walsh, a self-proclaimed theocratic fascist who's a neo-Nazi for all intents and purposes, just as bad as Nick Fuentes. The only difference between Matt Walsh and Nick Fuentes is that Nick Fuentes is more honest and explicit about his Nazi viewpoints, whereas Matt Walsh hides it a little better. As for Mark Levin, it's especially ironic for him of all people to sound the alarm, given how he bears responsibility for Nick Fuentes' radicalization. I mean, let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
You listen to Mark Levin every day?
In high school, yes.
Wow.
I was a fan. But I'll never forget one show. He goes live and he says, America's becoming a majority non-white country. Does anybody think that's a good idea? And I was thinking to myself, yeah, that actually doesn't sound so good. I didn't really even think that America's becoming majority minority like that.
Wait, so you were radicalized on race by Mark Levin?
Yes.
Are you making that up? Or that's
a real story.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. He planted the seed at least.
Yeah. So you see, even though I guess I'm thankful in a way that there's finally this concerted effort among the right to curb the open racism within the Republican Party, I mean, I just can't help but feel like it's too late. Too little, too late. You simply can't put the genie back in the bottle. And the reason why it's not going to work and why their viewers aren't going to listen to them is because the modern day conservative movement is built on a foundation of hatred. Trump just won the last election by fomenting hatred against immigrants. He ran on mass deportation, literally. And now he's doing that. The Republican Party spent the last 5 years calling all LGBTQ plus people groomers. The party is currently trying to gut the Voting Rights Act so that way they can disenfranchise black people in the South again and bring back the Jim Crow status quo. So, I mean, I don't understand why they're so surprised that the conservative base took their ideology to its logical conclusion. Like, why would they bite their tongues when it comes to Jewish people and Indian Americans when they've been taught that it's okay to openly hate immigrants and Muslims and queer people? It doesn't make sense to them because if you're a bigoted Tucker Carlson viewer or Ben Shapiro viewer for that matter, it seems arbitrary to draw certain lines or make exceptions for some minorities. If you give them explicit permission to hate some minorities, they're going to view that as a green light that they can hate all minorities because they're all the same to them at the end of the day. If they ain't white, they ain't right. In their minds, Indian and Jewish people are just as inferior as trans people and immigrants are, right? And that's why the condemnations of Tucker Carlson haven't resonated with their audiences because it's ideologically inconsistent and feels arbitrary. Like, you can't tell them it's okay to hate these people, but you can't hate these people. That just doesn't make any sense. But again, that's not to say that I oppose them speaking out. They should speak out, seeing as how the Nazi strain in their party does pose an existential threat to all of us. But that doesn't mean that they're that much better than Tucker Carlson because they aided and abetted the rise of fascists like Donald Trump, who's currently creating the society that gets Nick Fuentes that much closer to the white Christian dystopia that he wants so badly. And so long as the so-called moderate conservatives like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and others continue to hyper-focus on the demonization of marginalized minorities, they don't have a fucking leg to stand on, in my opinion. But they're not going to stop fomenting hatred and division because conservatives and their entire business model is premised on them pitting Americans against each other. So that way, if we're fighting each other, we're not going to take on the oligarchs at the top who are robbing us blind. The same oligarchs who fund Ben Shapiro's show, by the way, who fund all of these conservative talk radio shows, by the way. But with all of that being said, let them fight, okay? Let these motherfuckers fight, because at the end of the day, if they fight, at a minimum, them being divided is going to make them less effective, which is objectively good for this country. So, to that I say, have at it, fellas. Keep fighting, and we have to do our best to fan the flames because they have to go at it. I want them to fight. They have to fight, and let them duke it out. I hope it gets ugly.